Chickenpox, the disease of yesteryear. Or is it? Find out on today's Vax Matters.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Vax Matters. Now, you knew it was coming. Chickenpox is the disease of discussion for today, and we are so excited to explore its history and the vaccine developed for that illness. Today, we welcome pediatrician Dr. James Wayne of Ochsner as we talk about chickenpox, walk you through the timeline of it and its global impact. Dr. Wayne, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Let's begin at the beginning. What is chickenpox?
Chickenpox is a viral illness. Believe it or not, it is a respiratory illness primarily. It's passed on via droplets from one person to the next, usually. So it can cause symptoms including fever, runny nose. Believe it or not, it causes a sore throat in some patients. But we know it for its viral exanthem. The classic description of the rash or viral exanthem that's associated with chickenpox is dewdrop on a rose petal. So, you have a lesion that's on a red base and it has a little vesicle that sometimes will be clear or, sometimes a little bit cloudy on top of that red base. So that's the classic description of the lesions from chickenpox.
Highly contagious because it is airborne, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. It's passed on via droplets from one person to the next. It can be passed on via contact with an open lesion as well. So if you have, open lesions that are kind of oozing, you can get it from contact that way as well. But primarily, it's passed on via droplets, just like the common cold.
This might be a stupid question, but I'm just going to get it. I'm going to get it out there right at the top. Why in the heck is it called chickenpox when does a chicken have anything to do with anything, Dr. Wayne?
No, the chicken doesn't have anything to do with it. Other than the fact that, I guess in somebody's mind back in the day, they thought that the individual little pox, the little bumps that it leaves, were similar to a chicken after it's been plucked. So you know how chicken's skin is kind of bumpy.
That's a lovely analogy, huh, Clay?
Yeah.
Wow.
So bumpy chicken skin. So that's how it got its name.
That pox is kind of a blister, is it not? Kind of a little blister, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
we got that cleared up right away.
I'm pretty sure some of the folks listening just paused the podcast so they can finish their lunch or breakfast or whatever. And that is not a dumb question. That is actually a very good question. Yeah. Where did chickenpox come from?
Well, it is a viral illness. I'm not sure that I can speak to when it was very first identified. But like the rest of the illnesses that are circulating yearly illnesses within the human population, chickenpox has been around for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. It's not a new illness.
Is there a similarity? Maybe it's just because of the name. That do people get chickenpox and smallpox mixed up in their brain? Of course, those of you with the medical expertise and background would not, but just for the general public, you hear pox and you think, it's the same one, the same thing, and they're vastly different.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that smallpox. Yes, it's dramatically different in the way it's spread and the way the pox look, the severity of the illness. They are, when it comes to smallpox, we have a vaccine against that has been highly effective. We also have a vaccine against chickenpox, but at this point, smallpox has been eradicated from the human population. It exists in laboratories. We're trying our best to not let, those who would do people harm get their hands on smallpox, but smallpox, thanks to a strong vaccination effort that took place, before most of our lifetimes, has been eradicated. Some of us still have a little scar on our shoulder from our smallpox vaccine. Mm-hmm. I got my vaccine before going to Iraq back in 2004.
Oh, gosh.
But others are old enough to have received the smallpox vaccine as children. And thanks to that vaccination effort, we don't have to worry about smallpox anymore.
We love to hear the word eradicated,
Yeah,
Clay. I mean,
yeah.
that is the word. We talk about all the vaccines and everything on this podcast. That is the prime word
Mhm.
that so many health professionals are striving for.
Yeah.
That more of these viruses and what have you will have that word and have
Yeah.
the asterisk eradicated.
Well, the more that I
And
think people consume information and learn about the efficacy of being vaccinated
Mhm.
from the various viruses out there, the less we will have to deal with them. Doc, who did the distinguishing separation between smallpox and chickenpox?
um, to be honest with you, I cannot speak to that. I'm not sure. So I'd have to look that up
Because it's
myself.
interesting because you talked about the differences that, as Diane said, people may hear them and think that they're related in some way, but that's just really a nomenclature. They're not related at all because they
No, they're not.
Mhm.
do totally different things. Do you find now, because we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast with various doctors about diseases that require viruses, because COVID-19 has taken so much out of the air, so much of the air out of the room for everything else, do you think we don't talk about chickenpox enough and promote the fact that children should be vaccinated and there are things that we should be thinking about preemptively before someone gets it?
So one of the things with chickenpox is that people don't think of it as a potentially fatal disease. So this is something that is a life-threatening illness, especially in those who are immunocompromised. It's a life-threatening illness, and more severe illness for adults who were never exposed to chickenpox and aren't vaccinated against chickenpox. So this is something that is life-threatening.
Mm.
The good thing about the vaccine efforts is that because of the vaccine being out there for quite a while now, we rarely see chickenpox. In
Right.
my career, the last time I saw chickenpox was about 5 or 6 years ago,
Mhm.
and it was in a child who was under a year of age. So at that point, had not been able to get the chickenpox vaccine yet because you have to be a year or older. And his grandmother developed shingles,
Oh
Oh,
gosh.
wow.
which is a
Yeah.
reactivation of that same virus that causes
Mhm.
chickenpox. So that child ended up contracting, classic chickenpox
From shingles?
because of that exposure to shingles. Yes.
Really?
Wow.
Mhm.
That is
So,
incredible. I'm sorry, go ahead, doctor.
but that's the only child that I've seen probably in the past 5 or 6 years with chickenpox because of the vaccine.
And I think too that so many people in their brain associates chickenpox with a childhood disease that,
Right.
as Clay said, you almost, but I shouldn't say shrug it off,
Yeah.
but it doesn't appear to people that this is a really serious disease or this could be, as you said, a life-threatening disease. But that's the farthest thing from the truth. This is a very
Mhm.
serious disease.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when it comes to young children, for the most part, the things that cause them to be hospitalized with chickenpox, dehydration, because again, it causes sore throat. A lot of
Mhm.
times you have lesions within the mouth, and the children don't eat or
Wow.
drink very well. So they'll get dehydrated because of that. And then also secondary infections. So chickenpox can put people at increased risk for both secondary skin infections and also pneumonia as well.
Mm.
So it is potentially life-threatening disease for
It's a
children and adults.
it's a big deal. Like listening to you talk about it, and again, it doesn't get discussed as much, but it's a pretty big deal. What about nutrition and hygiene? Does that have any impact on a person contracting this or being able to avoid chickenpox?
So the healthier you are when you go into fighting off a disease like chickenpox, the more well hydrated you are, the better your course is going to be. So I get asked all the time, are there certain types of vitamins or a supplement that a child can take in order to help boost their immune system? I get asked that question a lot. The short answer is no. The important thing is a proper diet, being well hydrated. There's not any magic medicine or tincture that's going to boost the immune system and have them be able to fight off the illness sooner. But if they're eating a diet that is where they have fruit and vegetables and a lean protein source, if they're well hydrated, then they're going to be fine.
But that is a very good question to ask, almost a valid question, because parents they're trying to figure out what they can do to help their child. I know when I was a kid and even into my adulthood, my mom would always say, take your vitamins, take your vitamins. You always want to have, not that it's not good, but sometimes you almost want a little magic pill
Yeah.
to try to help with, the immune system with the childhood, to keep them, or the child rather, to keep them as healthy as possible. So that kind of brings me to the question, Dr. Wayne, about how common was the chickenpox prior to the vaccination? Because I know back in the day, many years ago, before the vaccination, I had chickenpox, and was it chickenpox the moms? I'm sorry, I get them mixed up, but I think my mom would bring my cousin and my brother into the room so they could be exposed, so they could get it over with, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was pretty common back in the day before vaccine?
Yeah, before the vaccine, chickenpox was almost ubiquitous, meaning
Was it?
like
Okay.
something that everybody got as a child.
Yeah.
Pretty universal then, yeah.
So unfortunately, I was the one who brought it into my household when I was in the 7th grade,
Oh gosh, you
12
were
years
older.
old
You were older
at
having it.
McKinley Middle.
Oh, they loved you
so
there at McKinley, huh?
yeah. So I contracted it at McKinley and brought it home
Yeah.
to my younger sister, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those things that was ubiquitous, and people would have parties like you're talking about where they would gather the children who hadn't been exposed,
Yes. Yeah.
so they could go ahead and get exposed
And get it over with,
and
basically.
and the fear was that if they weren't exposed to it as a child, that they could potentially have a more severe illness as an adult. So
That's kind of macabre, but it is the way it was thought about back then.
Yeah.
Go on and get it over with now, because you're more likely to survive it and be able to get through it than grabbing it and in adulthood.
It was almost a rite of childhood,
Yeah.
almost,
So, being a pediatrician, I'm pretty sure you are often having to dispel wrong information about things like chickenpox or the vaccine that you should get for it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm asked very frequently about the safety and efficacy of these vaccines.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a vaccine like the chickenpox vaccine, when it comes to the safety and efficacy, it's been proven. There is a chance that you can have a mild. Yeah, I've had some patients that have had mild cases of chickenpox after getting the vaccine. So 1 or 2 bumps and just kind of malaise, but not full-blown illness after getting the vaccine. So people worry about that because you're giving a live virus vaccine. This vaccine is actually a live virus vaccine. It's weakened to the point to where it makes the body more able to fight it off quickly. But it is a live vaccine, and people worry about that. But it is safe and effective. A lot of people ask me about preservatives in vaccines. Though, especially live virus vaccines like measles, mumps, and rubella, and the chickenpox vaccine, they're concerned about mercury and other heavy metals and toxins within vaccines. And there is no more mercury-containing preservatives in vaccines for children. So all of the thimerosal has been removed from vaccines for children. We don't have to worry about that. There's still this, unfortunately, lingering effects from Dr. Wakefield and the false information that he put out about the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine.
Yeah.
So we're still fighting against that every day. But at the same time, I'm open and willing to discuss these things and try to reassure parents about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines.
And the conversations that you have with parents, they're just trying to do the best for their family and for their child. And how wonderful, Dr. Wayne, that you can sit down with parents and tell them, these are the facts. You're hearing it from me. I know what I know what I've seen. I know what to do. And please let me do the best I can for your children. It's interesting too that the vaccine, it was released, I believe, in the mid-1990s, the chickenpox.
Yes.
Why, for those of us who lived way before the mid-1990s, why did it take so long for a vaccine to be developed? Or what was there something, what was it? I don't know. It just seemed like it would have been, since it was a childhood illness, that it would have been before the 1990s.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly why the vaccine, took a little bit longer to develop than you would expect. especially considering that the smallpox vaccine and how it was developed, it happened almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Serendipitously, I think is the word.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the smallpox vaccine and how it was developed was because they noticed that certain groups of people were immune to smallpox or less likely to get smallpox when it was ravaging communities. Those that were working closely with cows, primarily like milkmaids, were immune to smallpox. So that's where the saying, fares of milkmaid skin comes from.
Oh, okay.
Is that they weren't susceptible to smallpox. It was because cows would get a virus that was very similar to smallpox on their udders. They get cowpox. And these ladies from milking the cows actually had these cowpox lesions they would recover from, and, not have any ill effects from. And it was similar enough to smallpox that it vaccinated them and protected them against smallpox.
Oh my gosh. I don't think we've ever had that explained like that. Thank you. No.
So,
fascinating.
That's where the initial research into the smallpox vaccine came from that particular coincidence that was identified.
Wow, what a coincidence, huh?
But
at least they recognized it,
right.
Right. So, but as far as why it took until the 90s for a vaccine for chickenpox to be developed and FDA approved, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
For people who either don't have kids or don't know or have forgotten, when should someone get the chickenpox vaccine?
So we first offer it at the 12-month well visit. So it is approved for children 12 months and up. For those who are traveling internationally, we can give it to children younger than 12 months, but that doesn't count towards their vaccine series. They still will need another vaccine after 12 months. And then typically the next booster that we do is at 4 years and up. So prior to them starting school.
So how often do you need a vaccine booster? Is that just for the chickenpox? Is it just for the youngsters? It's not for adults who've been through the series or that have had chickenpox?
So it's the chickenpox vaccine is for children. It can be given to adults, but there's actually a specific vaccine directed towards adults now to help decrease their risk of shingles.
Right. Okay.
So there's a shingles vaccine that is, similar to getting a chickenpox vaccine, but directed towards adults. And it's to help decrease their risk of shingles later on. A little bit outside of my purview. My oldest patients these days are 19 years old.
I think most of us in this room are older than 19.
That's
I'm thinking.
That's right.
But again, our listeners, they need to know this because it's very critical for them to know what, because doctor, we've said this on our podcast before. Clay and I have said, sometimes we don't know what questions we need to ask.
Right.
And that's why, sometimes you get in a doctor's office and you're a little bit nervous because you're thinking, I'm taking the doctor's time. I don't want to take too much of his time. You try to write down the questions. You try to understand, but it's kind of a mental block too when you're trying to assimilate all the answers the doctor gives to you, that you want to make say the right question, understand the right answer, and then proceed for your family.
Yeah. You referenced earlier the story about one of your patients getting chickenpox after an encounter with his or her grandmother. And so we've established that there is a relationship between shingles and chickenpox. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So shingles is actually a reactivation of the chickenpox virus within a certain part of the skin on the body.
Okay.
And so once we're exposed to chickenpox, the virus never really leaves our body completely.
It never does. The virus
it never
always
does.
Okay.
The virus is always there, and usually dormant and living within a certain type of nerve cell near the spine. So it never goes away completely. And then there's always a possibility that that dormant virus could reactivate. And times when it tends to reactivate are times of stress. So if we're under, emotional or physical stress, it makes it more likely to reactivate. Times when our body is immunocompromised. So if we are taking steroids or any other type of medicine that suppresses our immune system, that can put us at increased risk for having the virus to reactivate. And when it does, it comes out in one specific dermatome. And by that, I mean a certain area of the skin that's innervated by one nerve bundle.
Mm.
So when you get shingles, it actually will come out in a band that goes across one specific area that is innervated by one little nerve bundle.
And once unfortunately you are diagnosed or you have shingles, what does one do? Can you speak on that, doctor? I don't know if you
Mhm.
feel comfortable, but what does one do once you do get the shingles?
So there are medicines that are antiviral medicines. The same types of medicines that are used for like herpes. When you have herpes simplex
Mhm.
virus, it causes fever blisters, or genital herpes as well. Because those illnesses are related. They're closely related in how they act in the body. The medicines that we use for herpes can actually be used to shorten the duration of the illness for shingles as well. So medicines like acyclovir and valcyclovir can be used when you first feel the tingle of shingles getting ready to come on. You can take a medicine like that to hopefully help shorten the
Mhm.
duration of the illness.
What is the typical
One,
duration?
it varies from person to person. Like I
Oh,
said,
okay.
if you are immunocompromised, if your body is, having problems fighting off illnesses for whatever reason, shingles can last for weeks.
Oh
For most
gosh.
people, it's like a 7 to 10 day thing, but it can last longer than that.
That is the more typical
Mhm.
lifespan, so to speak, of that.
Right.
All I know is I've never had them, never wanna get them, but because 'cause I've
Mhm.
heard that they're just horribly, horribly painful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You referenced earlier, Doc, about the impact of stress or a suppressed immune system. And I think we cannot overexpress the need to think about how stress impacts the body and the nervous system and the immune system. Could you lean into that a little bit? Because I think right now this is a hyper stressed environment, no matter where you are. And I think people don't often realize how detrimental it is to their personal health.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced those times where we've been underneath, increased amount of stress. And it just always seems like it's that time where we get a cold, where we,
Hmm.
get a stomach bug, where all of
Right.
a sudden, we're having these headaches that just won't go away. Um, so stress, in its various forms, changes the way the body is kind of prepared for responding to illness. So at the same time, our bodies are trying to help deal with those stressors. We're having increased inflammation in different parts of our body as well. And there are hormones that can help when our body is dealing with inflammation, and other types of chemicals that are released in our body under stress that are of detriment to fighting off illnesses and inflammation. So whenever we are under stress, it can actually change the way these hormones are being regulated in our body, and can put us at increased risk for illness. Um, and in this particular situation, it's an illness that is already there,
Right.
suppressed within our body. But then when that regulation kind of goes away, it puts us at increased risk for getting this illness, getting shingles.
And that's an excellent explanation too, Clay,
Yep.
because we don't realize until it's almost too late about stress and
Hmm.
how it is going to negatively impact us. And then you think, okay, I don't want to have any stress. Then you put more stress on your body. You try, then you're just on the hamster wheel, and it gets a little wearisome when we're trying to take care of ourselves. And sometimes it just
Yeah.
doesn't happen that way.
Yeah,
And rest And
Yes.
getting appropriate rest is
Hmm.
of extreme importance. So one of the other stressors that we can, heap upon ourselves is lack of sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have control of it, sometimes we don't have control of it. But when we do, and can get adequate rest, it's important for us to do that.
I love it. We've talked on this podcast before about what vaccines are and how sometimes they can replicate what viruses do. So I'll ask this question. If you get the chickenpox vaccine, could it give you shingles?
Believe it or not, yes,
Huh.
it is possible for you to later in life. Now, not you're not going to get it typically as a child
Right.
unless there's other illnesses going on, things that make you immunocompromised, like we just talked about. But can someone who has had the chickenpox vaccine as a child later in life get shingles? The short answer to that is yes.
Wow.
The
Really?
chickenpox virus, the vaccine is a live virus vaccine. It's a weakened form of the virus that makes it easier for the body to fight off, but it goes dormant, lives in those nerve cells the same way, and can become reactivated.
So
So
it's
it is possible. And that's why that adult shingles vaccine
mhm.
is important.
It's probably unusual or rather rare for it to occur, but it can occur.
Correct. Correct.
Do you
So, and at this point in the life of this vaccine and how long we've been using it for the past 35 years or so, can we say for sure that when our children that got it when they were uh, when they were 1 year old back in the mid 90s, could they potentially end up with shingles as a 70-year-old?
mm,
It is possible, because it is a live virus vaccine. The important thing, though, is that we do have a vaccine, essentially a booster, to help to decrease the risk of that happening later on.
so let me ask you this, doctor. Do you ever
Mhm.
think that the possibility might be there that chickenpox will go the same route as smallpox? And then what I mean by that is that we will eradicate it, maybe not in my lifetime, but possibly your lifetime?
Is it possible? Yes,
Is it
it is
probable?
possible. Is it
Yeah.
probable? No.
Okay. Mm.
And I guess, and this is just me speaking. This is, please don't take this as, hard and fast science, but this is just my opinion. Um, when it comes to illnesses like chickenpox, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, is one of the things that keeps it alive. And that's the fact that for the vast majority of people, it is not a life-threatening illness and not a severely disfiguring illness. The thing that smallpox had going for it, as far as being a target for eradication, smallpox was disfiguring and life-threatening. People died from smallpox, and those who didn't, who contracted it, it was permanently disfiguring.
Mm.
That's the recipe for an illness that is prime to be eradicated with a vaccine.
Absolutely. Abs
And the main reason why is because people fear that illness.
mhm.
And the issue with the anti-vax movement, and I'll get on my soapbox for a little bit. The issue with it is that they fear vaccines, regardless of how well studied they are, regardless of how well we've proven the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. They still fear these vaccines more than they fear these life-threatening illnesses, because they've never seen somebody who has contracted polio. They don't fear polio. But we know that this is a life-threatening illness that can cause paralysis, can cause death. Um, you know, these days we don't often see. Every once in a while, we'll see somebody who had childhood polio, but it's very rare. So because it's not there in your face, it's easier for people to say, "Well, I'm not afraid of this because it's not going to come knocking at my door." But the polio vaccine was effective in the United States because people feared it. They saw neighbors, children of neighbors hospitalized people dying of this illness. So in those situations, a safe and effective vaccine was a lot easier to use, a lot easier to convince people that this was important. I think chickenpox is one of those things that, because it's less likely to be life-threatening, that it is not really prime for eradication.
And it's something
Um,
that you hear about all of your life. As we,
mhm,
adults, you've always heard about, oh, it's just not just, but it's chicken pox. And it just seemed
mhm,
like it was so common. And some
right.
of the other things, like you said, that people would think, oh, you're just exaggerating. It
Right.
wasn't that bad. That
Mhm,
virus wasn't that bad, or whatever virus you're talking about, not just, chicken
right.
pox. But I think you're just so, spot on there, doctor, saying that because people didn't visually see it,
Right.
the polio or the smallpox rather, the disfigurement, it's like
Mhm,
almost shrugging your shoulders. It's not going to happen to
mhm,
me.
Yeah.
Not going to happen to anybody I
Well,
love.
that's what I
Yeah.
meant earlier when I was
Hmm.
asking about chickenpox now, is that you don't see it
Yeah.
often. And so it's not something that COVID-19 was so jarring to us because of the speed at which it took people out. And
Hmm.
so it
mhm.
really made people want to get vaccinated. And a lot of minds got changed either by watching someone they cared about contract the coronavirus or having gotten it themselves. And then it's like, okay, yeah,
It's a new
let me
ball
go.
game. It's a new ball
It's a
game
new
then.
ball
Yeah.
game when you've
Yeah.
experienced it yourself. Is there anything about chickenpox and the vaccine that we may have missed today, that some information that you would like to get out?
Um, the main thing that I would like to say that it's a safe and effective vaccine.
Mhm.
Um, it's nothing that the parents need to be fearful about giving to their child. The vaccine does not contain thimerosal or any other heavy metals that could be damaging to a child's neurologic system. People worry about, vaccines affecting a child's development.
Sure.
And it's important for them to understand that it's safe and effective. Um, so that's the main thing that I would like to get across.
And to feel free to talk to your pediatrician and to ask as many questions as you feel comfortable, and just to feel confident in the pediatrician's ability to help you and your children.
Mhm.
Dr. James
Absolutely.
Wayne, you have been amazing. Thank you. I think a lot of us thought we knew about chickenpox, but
Right.
we needed a refresher. We needed to find out more about this. And I know our listeners are going to be very appreciative of your expertise and everything that you did for us today. So, Dr. James Wayne, thank you again for being with us.
No, thank you. And I need to do some research and find out a little bit more about the history of the vaccine itself, and its development. So I definitely will do my homework and make sure that I have those facts
well,
available as
well,
well.
look, the more
So,
important thing is if someone catches it today,
Yeah.
or you can help them prevent it today. So
absolutely.
the other side of that is great, but being able to do it right now is probably more important.
That's the bottom line, too. A
That's right.
fabulous job. Thank you so much, Dr. Wayne. And such an eye opening episode. Thank you to all of our listeners. You took the time to listen to this today, and we so appreciate it. We will see you next time on Vax Matters.